Immigrant, the 1828 definition of American. America before the word. Before the United States claimed authority, the Southeast already had nations, diplomacy, war traditions, and international treaties. These people were American before the U.S. defined itself. The definition of American, according to the 1828 Webster's Dictionary, is a native of America, originally applied to the Aboriginals or copper-colored races found here by the Europeans, but now applied to the descendants of the Europeans born in America. America existed long before American borders. By 1838, the United States was still defining who counted as American, not just legally, but culturally, racially, and historically. That definition collided with people who had already been here for centuries. The Southeast was a war zone. From the 1500s to the early 1800s, the southeastern United States was shaped by Spanish-English imperial wars, intertribal conflicts intensified by European trade, and forced relocation and captive exchanges. These weren't side stories. They were nation-forming wars. Early treaties recognized native nations. The Treaty of Hopewell with the U.S., Cherokee, Choctaw, and Chickasaw. The U.S. recognized tribes as a distinct political communities, negotiated nation to nation. This is not immigration. This is international recognition. Captivity, adoption, and intermixing. Before rigid racial categories, captives were adopted into tribes. Europeans were absorbed into native kinship systems, and Africans, Iberians, and natives formed new peoples, not mixed remnants. In the Southeast, identity was relational, not bureaucratic. Spanish Florida La Florida included Sephardic conversos, Spanish allied native towns, and mixed Iberian indigenous communities. The Treaty of Paris in 1763 transferred Florida from Spain to Britain without moving the people. Citizenship changed, but the Americans stayed. Sephardic Iberians arrived early. Sephardic Jews and Iberian Christians arrived with Spain and Portugal. Conversos, crypto Jews, traders, soldiers, refugees, many fled the Inquisition, some integrated into native communities through marriage, trade, and alliance. They did not arrive as immigrants in the modern sense. They arrived before the nation state. Intermixed communities were treated as Americans. The Treaty of Fort Jackson after the Creek War, the U.S. punished even Creek factions who fought with the U.S., seizing land regardless of mixed ancestry, prior alliance, long-standing settlement. This marks a shift from relationship to radicalized control. Tribes were not isolated. Southeastern tribes, Muskogee, Yamasee, Temecula, Choctaw, Cherokee, and others, practiced diplomatic adoption. They absorbed outsiders who accepted obligations, and they treated identity as belonging plus responsibility, not blood quantum. Intermixing was intentional survival, not dilution. The law begins to redefine American. Johnson versus McIntosh, 1823, the Supreme Court ruling it ruled indigenous people had the right of occupancy, and ultimate title belonged to the U.S. Translation: You can live here, but you don't own America anymore. Nations reduced to dependence. Cherokee Nation versus Georgia in 1831. The court ruled tribes were domestic dependent nations. They were not foreign and not citizens, but still governed by U.S. power. This is where Americans become legal wards on their own land. Citizenship explicitly denied. Worcester versus Georgia, 1832. The court affirmed states had no authority over native nations, yet Georgia ignored it, and so did the federal government. Law was no longer about justice. It was about who counted as American. 1838, a turning point. By 1838, Indian removal was law. American was being narrowed down to mean white, Anglo, and land owning. Long established peoples were reclassified as others. The definite the definition of American was rewritten, not discovered. 1838 removal codified. The Treaty of New Achota, 1835, was used to justify the Trail of Tears in 1838. It was signed by a minority faction, rejected by most Cherokee citizens, but enforced anyway. Citizenship was claimed by the U.S. Americanness was stripped from the people, who became foreign overnight. People who had fought colonial wars, lived on land for generations, and intermarried across native and Iberian lines were suddenly labeled Indian to be removed, colored to be excluded, and foreign despite no migration. Where mixed descendants fail. Intermixed families, native plus Iberian plus African, often excluded from tribal roles later, they were denied citizenship rights and labeled colored or foreign. They were American enough to remove, but not American enough to protect. Immigration versus inheritance. Immigration implies arrival into an existing nation, but many Southeastern families predate the United States, predate English dominance, inherited America through war, labor, kinship, and survival. They did not immigrate, they endured. Two legal meanings of American. By the 1830s, American was pre-U.S. peoples, treaty partners, and land-based nations. American, in the U.S. citizen sense, is defined by federal law, racialized, and expandable only when convenient. These meanings were never the same. Citizenship came after dispossession. To say we are the Americans is not arrogance. It is historical correction. America was built from indigenous ground, shaped by Iberian presence, and sustained by peoples later erased from the story. Nationality came after them, not the other way around. Indigenous people were not granted U.S. citizenship broadly until 1924. So for nearly a century, the U.S. claimed America while excluding its original Americans. That contradiction still echoes. American began as a place, a people, a lived reality, long before it became paperwork. Descendants of these interwoven histories are not guests in America. They are its continuity. We are the Americans. Our claim to being American is older than U.S. citizenship, older than state borders, and older than the courts that tried to redefine us. Misnomers of Black Americans. Many nations within a name. The American Gumbo Pot. 1492 Indian, 1492 Moor, Islam, Moors, 1492 Sephardic Jews, Judaism, Ladinos, 1539 Negro, 1550 Morisco, Catholicism, 1610 Huguenots, Protestants, 1619 Slave, 1683 Black, 1782 African American, 1758 Colored, 1790 Free people of color enslaved, 1835 African American, 1863 to 1916 Negro, colored, black, 1916 Negro, 1950 colored, 1965 black, 1970 Afro-American, 1980 black, 1999 minority, 2000 black, 2016 ADOS, 2020 FBA, 2025 Solon. We are the Americans. What is stopping you from calling yourself an American? Claim your birthright. Hashtag the American Movement.